Testing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Is it Josh? Hey, Josh.
Because the angle makes the picture.
Do you need me to turn it up or turn it down? Or? Okay, Josh, that's fine.
Maybe zoom in a little. I don't know.
Speaking of,
Okay. Do I need to reference them?
Although it doesn't look sharp. We're actually live right now. But it doesn't look sharp. It's the only thing I'm
And again, I'm waiting until the whole thing is
real
done
fuzzy.
correct before I go.
That's sweet. Yeah, we bond because we're right from
Okay. Is Joan still there? Can you pass Joan?
Why it would be that?
Yeah, we didn't know we had been in, of course.
Why it would be that fuzzy?
Sorry.
It looks fuzzy, then it got good. I'm actually. It'll be okay.
Hey,
Leave it home. They're running it live right now to see what it'll do. It's just not sharp at all.
Okay, I just wanted to double check. Alright, thank you so much for helping everybody. Okay.
No, I was here and then he moved here about a month later. He's transferred to work for Boeing. So he was working for Boeing in Seattle and then he transferred
Yes.
to Boeing.
It just says that Joan thing just takes a while to connect. That's all good. It's all based on
That's
software.
our ideal spot. But
Which we don't have often, but we have.
y'all want to go live on a stream, but he has a process that he goes through, and he needs to talk about his credentials. I don't know that you want to cover that live. It's not really part of his talk. So we're going to go.
That's fine.
So we're going to let him come up and just talk about that very briefly, okay? And then if we'll get close to 5, we'll try to give him a high five.
Awesome, thank you.
My name is Tim Monville. My title is Senior Air Safety Investigator with the National Transportation Safety Board out of Ashburn, Virginia. And I guess to begin with, I'd like to express on behalf of the NTSB the condolences to the family and friends of the occupants of the airplane. In terms of the investigation, NTSB was notified yesterday evening. I arrived on scene this morning and began the process of the investigation, which included documenting the accident site. I was able to meet with local law enforcement, several mutual aid agencies, and with their assistance, we began the process of the investigation, meaning documenting the wreckage. I've also had a chance this morning to listen to the audio tape, as well as look at a very brief segment of security video footage. What we do understand with respect to the accident flight, the purpose was a training flight of 2 pilots who were contract employees for the owner. The aircraft is based in Birmingham. I don't have exact details of the departure time and details after takeoff of Birmingham, so I'll begin with what we know from this airport. And with respect to the audio tape, what we do have or understand, an occupant of the aircraft advised the tower that they wanted to practice 2 instrument landing system approaches to Huntsville, and then would return to Birmingham. The security video depicts about 1,000 feet of the beginning of the takeoff roll, and then depicts a very sketchy portion of the end of the flight. It's very difficult to discern. But by witness accounts, we know the aircraft is cleared for takeoff runway 18 right. By witness accounts, the airplane climbed no higher than 50 to 100 feet off the ground and was observed to bank hard or steep to the right. The airplane impacted west of the runway and was destroyed by impact in a post-crash fire. I mentioned we began documenting the site, and that's still very early in the process. Most of the day has been spent. We've been trying to locate and access the onboard cockpit voice recorder, which, if it was working, can be very beneficial to the investigation. We think we have that located, and following this press conference, we're going to go back out and try to access it. Following on beyond this, the investigation will continue tomorrow and over the next couple of days, documenting the site, documenting the wreckage, being assisted by representatives of the Federal Aviation Administration and also a representative of the engine manufacturer. Once the site has been documented, the wreckage has been documented, it will be recovered, taken to a secure location, and then we'll follow on with our investigation at that location. Our investigation typically takes 9 months to a year, and we hope to have a preliminary report published in about 10 days. That's what I have at this time. Yes?
Did you have any indication, sir, that they might be trying any sort of maneuvers on takeoff? You said they were going to do landings. Does that include possible maneuvers on takeoff as well?
I don't have that detail at this time. If the CVR, the cockpit voice recorder, was working, hopefully that will discern conversations in the cockpit, and from that we can glean the intent, if there was any, during takeoff, but at this point I do not know. I guess I can say there was no distress call made by any of the crew members to the tower personnel.
Any indication of fire or anything before the crash?
None that's reported.
You say it was a training exercise. Can you dive into that a little bit?
I've talked to the chief pilot of the owner of the aircraft, and he's relayed this was for recurrent training for the two company contract pilots. I don't have more details at this time. As part of the investigation, we'll be looking at experience of all three occupants of the airplane. I just don't have that at this time.
So you don't know what training exercises they were performing?
At this point, I'd rather keep it rather generic. I don't have specifics in terms of what do they typically perform in flight. I will try to determine that, but I don't have it at this point.
Do you have any generic training term you can give us? Is that possible?
Okay. Wow. They would do some kind of altitude work, either turns, steep turns, that kind of thing.
Are there rules and regulations regarding what they can do? They're fairly close to a road, a public road. Are there any indication? Were there any problems or indications? Are there rules what they can do in terms of testing that close to a road?
Well,
this is what I'm asking.
You're talking about sound like a regulatory question kind of thing, and that would be more. I'd have to direct it to FAA on that matter.
Do we know the date until the plane was serviceable? I guess flyable.
No, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Does the FAA determine the plane's serviceability or flyability until a certain date? Has that come out yet?
An airplane is required to be inspected, periodically, and that's done by independent mechanics and people with inspection authorizations who are trained on the aircraft. Is that what you're asking?
I mean, that's what you know.
Well, one of the things, maybe to answer your question, I'll tackle it this way. As part of the investigation, we've asked for the maintenance records of the aircraft, and we have some, but we don't have all of them. So that will be something we'll be looking into in terms of the maintenance of the aircraft. Is it properly maintained in terms of what was required to be done to it? I don't have the answer right now in terms of its current maintenance.
Have you been able to determine who was at the controls?
That's as part of our investigation. We hope to, but it's too early to. I don't have the information to be able to do that.
Just to make sure I understand, these two pilots the two men that were training, one of them was a pilot. Were all three already pilots and they were just getting additional training, or were the two of them trying to get their license?
All occupants of the aircraft are and were certificated pilots. The training, what the chief pilot described to me is, again, he needed these two individuals to get their recurrent training. So that was the purpose and the intent of the flight, recurrent training for the two contract employees of the company. That was being done by another individual.
Could you explain a little bit more about what recurrent training is?
Sure. I mean, an aircraft, certain aircraft may require training on a yearly, every year kind of thing. So this training may meet that requirement for training on a yearly basis. The company may have procedures in place to specify you get training every 6 months, or so I have to delve into that. But they were being active enough to request that. So that's what we have at this point. Again, it's very early in the investigation.
Is there a specific reason why they were actually in Huntsville?
I don't know that yet.
Mr. Smith was the instructor, and Mr. Christopher and Mr. Russo were the pilots being trained?
I don't, this is, I've been in this investigation now for not even 24 hours, and it's going to have to be looked at and vetted. So I'm not willing to go into that detail in terms of this investigation and this press briefing.
Do we know, was there any kind of final destination? Were they going somewhere, or were they just doing these training exercises to come back here to Huntsville?
Well, we believe that when one of the occupants contacted the control tower and requested to perform or execute two practice instrument approaches, The individual then said they were going to proceed to Birmingham. So their intent after 2 of these approaches would be to fly to Birmingham by the comment on the tower tape.
And they took the second attempt. They had already gone up once, come down, and they were going up the second time.
I don't have I have not reviewed all the voice data, nor do I have all the radar data for the previous flights and what transpired here at Huntsville. So I was only comfortable from a factual perspective talking about the accident flight, what I had and what I had heard. Obviously, that's something that I will be looking into, what all transpired that day. But it's premature for me to speak to that because I've not heard it and I don't have it confirmed yet.
Just to confirm, you did say that there was no distress call.
No distress call made. That's correct.
Do you have any indication yet of what caused them to bank after they were starting to take off?
No, I do not. Again, we've just begun, just documenting the basic site is going to take several days. So to get to the end of that conclusion, we have to look at a lot of different systems of the airplane to show what systems that could have caused a discrepancy, if any. And so we've got to rule them out, and we'll look at every one that could have caused a roll on this aircraft. So we have a long way to go to get there.
Tough question. I know you told me your name. Can you spell it for me?
Sure, Tim, and last name is Monville. It's M-O-N, V Victor, I-L-L-E.
Now, I know that you said that you guys had some maintenance records, and the records that you do have, is the aircraft up to date based on the records you've seen so far?
Well, I'll answer it this way. We do not have the current records for this aircraft. They stopped some years before. We just have to access them and get access to them. And we will, but I just don't have them here. So I can't answer that question right now.
Understood. And what is an instrument approach?
Okay, so they're using ground-based equipment, navigational equipment, to guide the airplane to a precise altitude and point above the runway.
If we look at the pilot's background, does he have any previous incidents involving the FAA or NTSB?
Well, it's, again, good questions in terms of their background. As the investigation will look into that at length, but again, this is too early on to be able to answer that.
How many other people are here from NTSB? Is it just you or the...
Yeah, just myself.
Now, aircraft manufactured in 1983, is that something that's typical still in the air today, or is that kind of an anomaly?
There's airplanes that are, if they're properly maintained, they're much older than that, flying still.
Are we going to try to reconstruct the aircraft? What's left of it?
Well, we are going to have to in a better environment, but we're going to lay it out, and that will be a part of our process once it's in a secure location, yes.
Can you talk about how much there is left? I mean, do you have a lot of evidence of the plane remaining to go through? Or?
There is. The cockpit cabin area sustained impact and fire. The tail or empennage is still in place. So with what we have factually, the physical portion of the aircraft coupled with the cockpit voice recorder is going to be a big help for determining what happened in the sequence. Anything else?
How long do you anticipate the investigation going on?
Several days here, carrying on likely early into next week on scene, and then beyond that, we have to inspect the engines as a normal protocol, and there may be components out of the airplane that we have to look at further. So I can't give you a precise timeline, but it's going to carry on early into next week for sure with the on-scene portion.
How can we keep up with your report?
Well, two things. We publish our preliminary report on our website, and again, that's within about 10 days. I don't expect to give daily media inputs. I'm not sure how much I'm going to gather, and I don't want to be repetitive. But what I can say is if there's a demand, I can let our public affairs person know, and maybe they could disseminate something. I'll keep that person informed, and they can disseminate something broadly, but it's going to be very generic. Here's what we did today, kind of thing.
Do you know if the plane was inverted when it crashed?
We are looking into that. We have, I spent, a little bit of time today trying to analyze that. That's something, that's going to be very important to understand in terms of the investigation. But I'm not ready to give a conclusive answer to that yet.
In a generic answer, can you tell me how would a plane of this nature become inverted? If there's, usual...
There's so many variables involved that, from a systems approach of the aircraft, that could, coupled with something that's unrelated to the airplane. There could be some operational aspects that are happening from a cockpit perspective that I won't have answers to until. So I'd rather not, yes, there are, you can query any multi-engine pilot rated in the aircraft and they can give you some answers, but I'm not willing to go on record here